Hi everyone, welcome back to the Empowered Empath. Could calling yourself an empath actually hurt or hinder your spiritual or personal growth? Believe it or not, the answer is yes. And today I'm going to reveal 7 very common attitudes or ego traps to help you identify if you may be spiritually bypassing as a result of over-identifying with the empath label. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Empowered Empath. My name is Seraphim, and today I'm talking about 7 attitudes or ego traps associated with the label empath. So first of all, I want to be very, very clear. There is nothing wrong with identifying as an empath. My channel is called the Empowered Empath. So I certainly take no issue with the actual label of empath. Calling yourself an empath is a descriptor of your experience. It describes how you perceive the world. Many people actually struggle to take on this label themselves for a few different reasons. Some just don't feel worthy. They don't feel like they're able to take the label on because they feel like that's saying I'm special or I'm more special than the average person. And so there's a real fear of taking that on, or there's a sense that taking on the label empath is egotistical in some way, or things of this nature. There's also many empath communities that are highly toxic. And so I have met people who avoid that label for that reason as well. They don't want to be identified with communities that they saw as not being constructive or not being helpful. So there's all sorts of reasons why people may be reluctant to take on the title of empath or the label of empath. And in those cases, it may actually be beneficial to step into that authenticity, to step into your experience and own it and say, yes, I experience the world as an empath. Being an empath is a real experience. There's even science to back it up. In the brain of an empath, we have something, everybody has something in their brain called the mirror neuron system, which essentially is exactly that. When we observe people expressing various emotions, we tend to mirror what they're feeling. In an empath's brain, that mirror neuron network is hyperactive. So there's a measurable experience even in the brain function for an empath. You feel other people's emotions in your body as if they were your own. It's not to say that you're more special. It's not like you need to have some kind of worthiness to take on that label. It's simply meant to be a descriptor. I think it's a good one, and there's nothing wrong with it. However, as with anything, there are some traps that go along with it. There are some pitfalls that we can fall into, and so that's what I wanted to address today. When the label of empath becomes an issue, when we maybe are over-identifying with that label and kind of deciding what that means. So I'm going to jump right into the 7 ego traps, the 7 attitudes that can become problematic for empaths. Number 1, assuming you are always right about how you read a situation or a person's emotional response, and or having to save them from their own emotional responses or experience. So this happens a lot. Very often, someone who is empathic will pick up that something's not quite right with someone that they love. A big mistake that empaths make is assuming they know why the person is feeling that way. Sometimes there is a habit of assuming that it's them, that something that the empath is doing is upsetting that person. Or sometimes it's making an assumption that, something external they've picked up on is creating whatever emotional response in that person. We should never make those assumptions. People have unique emotional experiences, and we cannot assume that just because we pick up that something's not quite right, we know why. And very often you may find that you're actually surprised as to what's actually going on when you do dig beneath the surface, or when you do discover what it was actually about. So I'm going to offer the suggestion that when you pick up on something not being right with someone that you care about or someone that you love, go ahead and ask them. But if they don't want to talk about it, respect their space. Respect that, and don't make it about you by assuming that what they're upset about or what's off has to do with you. Start by assuming it has nothing to do with you. Unless the person has come to you and said to you, I have a problem with you, assume there's no problem because you have no reason to believe that there is one. And very often you may come to discover that you were never the cause of that person's pain, strife, or whatever to begin with. So entertain the possibility that it could literally be about anything and focus more so on holding space for that person. So being with that person through their struggle, through their pain, let them know that you're there for them, but give them the space to either come to you or not come to you, and let it be okay either way. The other piece of this is you do not have to save people from their emotions. The whole point of living is to feel. And so allow people to have their emotions. You can be present with them, be with them, hold space with them while they're experiencing those emotions, but allow them to have the emotions without having the need for them to feel better. Lots of times empaths feel the need to cheer people up, to make them feel better, because you pick up that they're not feeling happy or, not feeling themselves. So your instant reaction is, how do I make it better? How do I fix it for that person? Instead of feeling the need to save or fix, just be present with, hold space for. It's a completely different energy that you bring to the table then, and very often people are much more likely to open up to you, to share with you, and to be vulnerable with you when you are open enough to entertain their experience instead of simply your interpretation of their experience. Number 2, believing that being an empath makes you better than everybody else. This is obviously false. Being an empath doesn't make you better than anybody. We're all on a spiritual journey and everybody's journey is different. Every path is valid. Every path has value. So it's not really fair to say that you're better than someone simply because you're an empath. But many people do hold this attitude. Also, there are many people who are afraid to take on the title of empath because they're fearful that it might look like they're saying, I'm better than you, or I'm more special than you because I'm an empath. So if that's the case, I would suggest ask yourself, do you feel like if you were to take on the title or the label of empath that you would be saying, I'm better than you? Because it doesn't have to mean that at all. That's an interpretation that other people may hold, but it doesn't mean that you have to hold that interpretation. It is a descriptor for how you experience emotion and how you experience the world, and nothing more. It doesn't mean that you're better by any means. And I would put forward here that we are all both physical and energetic beings. It's perfectly natural to have both physical senses and energetic senses. Some folks are more dialed into those energetic senses. Some people have worked at honing those energetic senses and others haven't. Some people don't even believe in energy. And that's valid as well. Their path, their experience is certainly valid, just as an empath's is. And neither one is better than the other. They're just different. Number 3, adopting an us versus them mentality. This can sometimes manifest as empath versus narcissist. Not everyone who is not an empath is a narcissist, believe it or not. There are many people who do not identify as empathic, who are not narcissists, but who may not be as sensitive or dialed into what you're feeling. They may not be as compassionate, as gentle, as aware. That doesn't make them a narcissist. And I see this over and over again, that empaths will label people as narcissists if they had a bad interaction with them or if they had an unpleasant relationship. Not everybody that you have a failed relationship with is a narcissist. And very often, if there is an unpleasant feeling, if there is pain in a relationship, there is a lesson there for you. Simply saying, oh, they were a narcissist. You're spiritually bypassing your lesson. Maybe the lesson is, how did you attract the narcissist? How did you attract this abusive person? And why did you entertain the relationship? Where were the red flags that you should have or could have identified so that you don't fall into that trap again? That could very well be the case. Empaths do attract narcissists. There's no question. I would encourage you to check out my video, Why Empaths Attract Narcissists and How to Stop. I will link to that in this video for you. But the point is, we really have to be vigilant against an us versus them. Not everybody experiences the world as an empath, and certainly not everybody is as emotionally sensitive as an empath. So they may come off as cold, as uncaring, as callous when they're not. They just don't experience emotion the same way. So it's important to have room for all experiences and to recognize that just because someone doesn't understand your experience, it doesn't make them a narcissist. And there is not this us versus them. 4, becoming other. This is a matter of denying yourself a sense of belonging because you feel that you are too different to integrate into a group or to integrate into a community or your family or whatever it may be. Being an empath does mean that you experience things differently, but if you are assuming that you will never be understood, that nobody will ever get it because you're an empath, you're setting yourself up for an awful lot of loneliness. There are lots of people out there who are not empathic, but who can be compassionate and understanding of your experience as an empath. There are also many, many, many empaths out there who can experience or have a similar experience that they can share with you. So setting yourself apart, in a sense, is denying yourself that sense of belonging, which is exceptionally significant and very meaningful for human beings. We need to feel a sense of belonging, and when we don't, we feel outcast, we feel isolated. This can lead to depression, it can lead to a great deal of pain, that we don't have to go down that road. Being an empath does not make you other. You may experience things differently, but sharing that experience and finding people who don't judge you for that experience is absolutely possible. I promise they are out there. However, many empaths do have a habit of attracting people who don't value them, who don't value their experience, and therefore they can be left feeling other or like an outsider. So I would challenge that idea. I would challenge the concept that being an empath makes you an outsider or makes it harder for you to have that sense of belonging, because it doesn't have to be that way. And it truly is nothing more than a perspective that some empaths may be holding. So I would encourage you to challenge that perspective if you find that you believe that you are so different, so other, that you cannot have belonging with people who don't identify as empathic. Number 5, being an empath becomes the focal point of your identity. I've said a few times through this video that saying that you're an empath is a descriptor for your experience. It's simply describing how you experience the world and describing the phenomenon of experiencing other people's emotions in your body as if they are your own. It's a descriptor. It is not the core of your identity. Your identity is so much more than simply being empathic. It is part of your identity, certainly. It is a big part because it's how you experience the world. It's how you take in the world. It's a big part of the filter through which all of the stimulus you receive goes through first. So being an empath is certainly a big part of your life if you are an empath, but if it becomes the focal point of your identity and everything hinges upon how you receive things as an empath, that's an issue. It's an issue because there's more to life than simply feeling other people's feelings. And if you're lost in that, then you're not experiencing your own path. You're too wrapped up in what other people are feeling and the impact that it's having on you versus being wrapped up in your path, what you're doing, what you're experiencing. One of the biggest challenges for empaths is to shift the focus from what they're receiving to what message they want to project. Number 6, using your experience as a measure to determine whether or not someone else is empathic. I'm not going to spend too much time on this one. I'm simply going to say that number 1, we shouldn't be judging another person's experience. Whatever their experience is, it has value for them. It's valid for them. It might not be for us, but it's their experience, so that's fine. I would also say that there's a lot of judgment going on there. If you're deciding whether or not someone else is an empath, there's a lot of judgment within you in that moment. Why do you need to judge their experience? Being an empath means that you feel other people's feelings in your body as if they are your own. If you're not in the person's body you don't know. You can't say with any degree of certainty whether or not they're having that experience. Also, people cope very differently when they're overwhelmed by emotions. Some people cope, they're very quiet, they withdraw, they keep things to themselves. Some people have outbursts. They're really overwhelmed by emotions and they just bubble up and over. So, there's two very different ends of the spectrum here, and it's irresponsible to make those kinds of judgments about someone else's experience. If they're not an empath, it's fine. That's going to come to light. You don't have to worry about proving to them or anybody else what is true. You just need to worry about being authentic in your own path, focus on that. Everything else will fall into place and take care of itself. So try not to focus on other people's experience or on other people saying, I am an empath. And if you are triggered by that, go inward. What's your lesson there? Because you're not going to change that person. If you're trying to change somebody else, it's an exercise in frustration. But where's the trigger for you so that you don't have to feel that unpleasantness? Number 7, it's like that because I'm an empath. This is basically saying that whatever challenges you encounter as a result of being an empath simply cannot be overcome. And I'm going to tell you that is false. That is 100% false. Whatever challenges you're encountering are showing you that there's a lesson there for you. There's something to be developed within you. There's something, some lesson, something that needs to be discovered, or a skill that needs to be honed, something that needs to be practiced. There is a lesson in every single challenge. If you're uncomfortable, if you're dealing with something that's difficult, ask where the lesson is instead of deciding I can't overcome that because I'm an empath. I just have to accept that that's how it is. So I'm going to give you a few quick examples of what I mean by this. This can manifest in all sorts of different ways. 1, not dealing with mental health issues. We all struggle with mental health sometimes. I just want to say that first of all, there's no stigma involved here. If you have mental health challenges, it's fine. That's life. Life's hard sometimes. And we have challenges. So it's not to say that you're weak or that there's anything wrong with you if you have mental health issues or challenges or whatever. But being an empath is not the same thing as having a mental health issue or challenge. I see a lot of times online people talking about how, I thought I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder or borderline personality disorder or depression. And it turns out I've decided I'm just an empath. That's not reasonable. Now, maybe you don't have whatever condition you were diagnosed with, but you need to go to a doctor and get a second opinion. I would encourage you to avoid self-diagnosis, and certainly avoid self-diagnosis as an empath, because being an empath may exacerbate some issues. It may have certain symptoms that look like other issues, but it's not the same thing. So that's one trap that we can fall into. Another is staying in toxic or abusive relationships far longer than we should because we're an empath. And this manifests in lots of different ways. I'm the only one who could love them. I'm the only one who can save them. I don't deserve any better. I'm always attracting people like this anyway, so I might as well just stay. There's all sorts of reasons why people who are empathic stay in abusive relationships. And empaths do tend to attract narcissists. That is true. So very often we wind up in relationships that follow the same patterns and we just fail to see all the red flags. And we just say, it's just because I'm an empath. It's just like that because I'm an empath. It doesn't have to be that way. This can also manifest as exceptionally poor emotional regulation. And this can affect empaths, certainly. When you're so overwhelmed by not only your emotions, but other people's emotions, sometimes you can lash out, sometimes you can struggle with your emotional regulation, but it's still your responsibility. As an empath, we have to practice emotional regulation, and it may be more challenging for us than for the average bear, but it's still our responsibility. We're still accountable for that. And so to simply say, I'm an empath, so I'm going to be oversensitive, I'm going to cry all the time, I'm going to get mad, I'm going to basically let my emotions run my life, that's not really acceptable. That's not really a reasonable expectation to have for the people around you to have to deal with. So this is a big one. It's important to take on emotional regulation and recognize that's your responsibility, and being an empath doesn't exclude you from that responsibility. Just the last one that I want to mention here is victim mentality. This is when we feel underappreciated. No one loves me. No one appreciates me. No one loves as deeply as I love. Nobody cares as much as I care. It's kind of being a martyr. And that is going to push people away like that. Nobody likes a martyr, and there's no reason for it anyway. If you don't have solid boundaries in place, and if you are not prioritizing your wellness, other people are going to take advantage of you. If you're not communicating your boundaries, and if you're not placing your energy into relationships where people value you and respect your boundaries, that's a choice that you're making. If you are investing in relationships where people trod over your boundaries, where people aren't expressing their affection, their appreciation for you, that's a choice. And I know that that's a hard pill to swallow, but you could choose to nurture different relationships. You could choose to bring new people into your life who maybe will value you more, who will show you that appreciation. Change is hard and scary for sure, but if those are things that you're experiencing, it may be that you are prioritizing the wrong relationships. It also may be that you might have unrealistic expectations in those relationships about what you will receive back. If you're an empath, you can't expect other people who are not empathic to have the same kind of response or insight as you. They're just not going to have it. And there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean that they don't love you. Empaths by nature do have big hearts. We love huge. And yes, that can make you feel a little bit underappreciated when other people don't love you back in the same ways. But here's where I'm going to point you to my video, being the one who loves more. Because it is a tough dynamic, but it doesn't have to leave you feeling neglected, forgotten, unloved, or less than. So those are all the examples that I want to share around this point. There's plenty of other ways that this may manifest, but these are the most common ones that I have noticed. All right, guys, those are my top 7 dangers of calling yourself an empath and how that may actually block your personal or spiritual growth. If you have others that you would add to this list, I want to hear about it. So let me know in the comments below. Also would love to hear your thoughts on these 7 and if you have any experiences with them yourself. Otherwise, that's it for this video. So thank you so much for watching. As always, if you want to learn more about my practice, you can visit tarotbyseraphim.ca or Tarot by Seraphim on Facebook. And also want to invite you to join the Empowered Empath Facebook group. So I will link to all that in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you next time. Blessings for now, guys.